Hey everyone, it's Pastor Scott Fielder. Welcome to another edition of Hope Lutheran Church in Hollywood's midweek devotional. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. We appreciate you checking us out. Please follow, like, or subscribe on whatever the platform calls for, and you will be able to get notifications not only about when this goes live, but also our weekly online Sunday service as well. Our reading for this week comes from the book of Romans, chapter 11, verses 25 through 36. So that you may not claim to be wiser than you are, brothers and sisters, I want you to understand this mystery. A hardening has come upon part of Israel until the full number of the Gentiles has come in, and so all Israel will be saved, as it is written, out of Zion will come the deliverer. He will banish ungodliness from Jacob, and this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. As regards the gospel, they are enemies of God for your sake, but as regards election, they are beloved for the sake of their ancestors. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. Just as you were once disobedient to God, but have now received mercy because of their disobedience, so they have now been disobedient, in order that by the mercy shown to you, they too may now receive mercy. For God has imprisoned all in disobedience, so that they may be merciful to all. Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are God's judgments, and how inscrutable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor, or who has given a gift to him to receive a gift in return? For from God, and through God, and to God are all things. To God be the glory forever. Amen. I'm sure you've maybe heard the old saying that you don't know what you don't know. And when it comes to matters of God and faith, that saying is applicable, unfortunately, in abundance. When people, ask me for recommendations about maybe a church to go to, maybe it's a friend of ours who's moving, and they're trying to find a new church in the area, and they know that a lot of pastors are pretty connected with lots of different pastors around the country, so they like to ask around. And if I maybe don't know any pastors in the area or of any churches that I'm familiar with, one of the things I always tell them at least to look out for is if that church that they end up deciding to visit seems to have all the answers. I tell them that I would be highly suspicious of places that seem to know answers to very difficult questions that have plagued humanity for centuries and are rigid about these said answers as if they were the rule that should be followed. But if a place like that has all the answers, once you have them, why would one even need to come to church anymore or be in a community where we're trying to learn together and, go through this journey of life together? Why would one need faith? Why would one need God in their life when you have all the answers? Sometimes we claim, as Paul says, to be wiser than others, and it always usually comes right back around to bite us, almost as if God always sends us this little reminder for us about how wise we really are. I think often we talk about being humble and not speaking too highly of ourselves. And this kind of thinking can also creep into our faith life when it comes to our wisdom. I often hear people say when I engage them in talks of faith or when maybe Bible studies that, I don't really know a whole lot, about the Bible. I haven't read much of it, or I haven't been, a person of faith for very long. And, really, I think kind of downplaying what you know and how wise you are is just as bad as boasting about maybe how wise you actually, how wise you think you are. I don't think that it's helpful to think that, we are just wiser than everyone else, but also when we, downplay the wisdom that we have, that too is a mistake. Paul even says in the reading that the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. It's not our job to downplay the gifts that God has given us and the calling that we have in this life, whatever that may be. We must learn to embrace what God has given us, because God's wisdom and knowledge, as Paul says, has great depth. And so it's something that we must dive into. That's why we're called to speak to those who know us, to see if this calling or these gifts can be confirmed, if we're maybe not just us seeing it in ourselves, but that other people see God working through us in those ways as well. And we're going to have times where we, and our neighbor, we're going to fall into one of those, two categories, either downplaying what we know too much or maybe boasting a little too much. And, either We're all going, to make mistakes. And in our reading, thankfully, Paul gives us a little hope in this matter. He says, by the mercy shown to you, they can now receive mercy. At the end of the day, we will receive mercy from God, and we should show one another that same courtesy. We know that everyone's going through something difficult that maybe we don't always see, and maybe they're really good at hiding it and putting on a brave face. And maybe they won't, say explicitly, but we know that there are signs, and sometimes it's often too late, and then we realize that what we were looking at were actually signs. We should then be reminded of the difficult times that we personally have gone through, and then show each other a little mercy and a little grace. And then, of course, we must remember to seek God for guidance and God's great wisdom, as Paul says, and use the gifts that God has irrevocably given to us to support those around us who are in need. The world is going to be hard enough on all of us as it is, so let's do our best to help one another get through it. Amen.